You're watching NFL Network here on a Monday with sad news, with this breaking news. We're mourning the loss of the great Don Shula today. The Dolphins say the patriarch of their organization is dead at the age of 90. Quite simply, the greatest of them all. 347 wins with the Dolphins, before that with the Colts. Won a championship with the Colts, won a couple of Super Bowls with the Dolphins, and was in charge with that legendary 1972 team, the only perfect season in the National Football League. An innovator, a leader, a man who was larger than life, a man who, as Jim Irsay, the owner of the Colts, say, helped define an era. Don Shula. Hard to truly put into words what he means to our game. Here's the quote from Irsay. "We'll miss you, Don Shula, one of the last of the all-time greats from an incredible era." Hard to put into words, Steve White, who joins me now here live on NFL Network, what he meant to the organization and really to the region. Steve, you covered the Dolphins there for a couple of years. He was everything.
He really was, Andrew. Look, I was the co-beat writer for the Dolphins from 94 to 96 with my dear friend Armando Salguero at the Miami Herald. Lived there for 9 years. And look, there's so many great athletes and coaches and sports figures that have come from South Florida and who've played in South Florida. Guys like Dan Marino and Alonzo Mourning and Dwayne Wade, a lot of tennis players. There's nobody even close in the stratosphere of Don Shula. And this goes to the respect that not only he commanded, but the respect that he earned from so many people whose lives he touched. And let's just get away from the football field part of it. Like, Don Shula was a devout Catholic, right? He was very, very religious. He was very philanthropic. He was very visible in the community as a coach and post-career. And it was tough for him when Wayne Huizenga bought the team in the mid-'90s and kind of, said time for Don Shula to go and time for Jimmy Johnson to come in, and how quickly people moved on to Jimmy Johnson, who's another great sports icon. So it was tough for Don Shula for a while, but he still made himself visible in so many other ways. In the past few years, when I would see him at the Hall of Fame, he'd be in a wheelchair. He was not in the best of health. But, the fact that he remembered me and was always so gracious and always so willing to share pointers to high school coaches or youth players when they came up and approached him, and when his former players like Marino and Nat Moore and some of these other guys who had a tough time playing for him now. Shula was a tough coach, but the way that they would just respect him and appreciate him, his impact on the sport, on the people who came in direct contact with him, but again, on that South Florida region, and especially in some of the philanthropic community, it is immeasurable. There's no way you can put a cap on exactly what he means. This is a devastated community right now. Even folks who never, who are too young to remember the Don Shula era, they have heard of him, and you better believe they understand how important he is.
It was so important, and I think huge as well, Steve, that he stayed there. He didn't leave, and that larger-than-life figure was omnipresent. And it's like you would see people, as you said, walk up to that wheelchair. It's not necessarily to kiss the ring, but it was to pay respect because the respect was so overwhelming. Even younger Dolphins fans would know that's the great Don Shula, and almost like stand there in awe. And he was always so gracious, too, when anyone approached.
Yeah, Andrew, I mean, and that was part of it. Look, as members of the media, right, you don't necessarily get close to the coaches or the people you cover. And Shula was tough. Now, he dealt with the media. He was very Bill Belichickian with the way he kind of handled it. He had a little bit more personality than Bill Belichick. But you could see, again, the respect emanated, right? He respected us. We respected him. Again, it was not always easy. You talked to a lot of players he played for. I mean, the Zonkas, the Mercury Morrises, they will tell you how hard it was to play for that man. But the results, they bore a certain type of respect. They were consistently good. And towards the end, when he changed from a run-based offense to a throwing offense, to the fact where they were on that treadmill of just being good enough to get into the playoffs but not good enough to get over, again, it was a hard time for him. But he still persevered. And the respect. Again, that day when they announced he was leaving the Dolphins, I just never forget the gut punch in South Florida that it felt all throughout, knowing like, wow, this really is the end. And now here we are when it really is the end of his life. But the memory, I mean, again, this will hover forever. He is one of the Mount Rushmore guys, and that chin and that profile of Don Shula will always be part of South Florida and the sports culture.
And part of the cradle of football in Ohio as well. Don Shula, who played at John Carroll, actually played 7 years in the National Football League, 21 interceptions as a defensive back. People forget that. And he, you could argue, is the patriarch of John Carroll football, and so many coaches and front office people as well who have come from that John Carroll tree, as that is one of the proud programs as well. Not Division I programs, but a winning program year in and year out. All goes back, in a sense, to Don Shula, who we lost today at the age of 9.